All right, let's try this one more time. Hi, everybody. As you're here, so this is my true form. In previous videos, I felt like it was more important to get the information out um, rather than, be presentable. And so now I feel much more presentable. I'm not feeling crazy about the lighting because it feels very dim, but it's not too bad. And there's a cat. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. I feel like it gives me more of like a mysterious vibe, like the lights on my face, but not my room. So maybe I could try recording at night or something. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, so what I wanted to talk about a little bit more about, and I mentioned it in my first video, is sort of adjusting your dial. And so what adjusting your dial means is it's pretty much talking about law of attraction to a degree, but not 1,000%. And so it kind of is also you are what you eat. So you want to be sure when it comes to what you're consuming in terms of media, in terms of thoughts, are things that are healthy, so to speak, right? They feed you, they nourish you. It's not empty. You're not getting like cheap dopamine kicks out of it. And so that's just the basic of it. But if we turn around and we expand it further in regards to spirituality, in terms of magic, in terms of energy, it's pretty much you setting your intentions and your expectations and saying, this is what I want, right? This is what I allow to come forward. This is what I put forward into the world. And so that dial is extremely important because especially as you get, have your abilities continuing to grow and develop, because it, unless you set it consciously, you just pick up a bunch of junk. And so there's fortunately, most of the time you have people who have basic protections in place because of spirits that are around them, because of guardians that are around them. Um, or maybe their abilities aren't in such a way that they are picking up a bunch of static or a bunch of crap. And not everyone has that option. Exhibit A, right? I have dealt with a lot of different things, a lot of different things. Um, my mind has been in a lot of different places. And some of this was me learning how to do it on my own with the guidance of my spirits, of my companions. And it wasn't until I kind of figured out like I'm being too negative, I'm putting too much emphasis in, these areas where I don't have control instead of focusing on areas where I do have control, where I do have access, where I can say what it is that I'm wanting to experience. So it's important to keep in mind where your head is, where your heart is, because subconsciously, when you're working with other things, that's going to be what's running in the background, right? That's sort of both the background, but also your foundation. And that's why a healing journey is so important because you're working on your foundation. You're working on, this thing that you're built on top of. And a lot of what that healing is has to do, of course, with past experiences or with problematic mindsets we learned from our parents or from older siblings, from our experiences. And so there's just a lot to inform this frequency, right, or this vibration um, that is set for you when you aren't setting it yourself. And so when I'm saying set your dial, that is what I'm talking about. And so I've heard of a meditative technique where you kind of just chill out and, meditate, bring your mind into the awareness of your body, focus on your breath. When you feel like you've reached that state of peace, you kind of set that dial and you say, I'm going to allow the experiences that help me grow as a person, that are beneficial to me, that feed me and nourish me. That's what's going to come forward. And I leave the rest, right? And then end meditation. And so when you're working with things that are like the law of attraction, function on similar ways as the law of attraction, don't use, don't. Not is a word that the universe does not hear. Because if I say I want this, I don't want this, well, I'm paying the same amount of attention to the things that I want and the things that I don't want. That attention, that energy is what's going out into the universe. But that not, it doesn't hear that not. It hears you're spending as many words on this as you're spending on this. You're spending as much brain power on this as you are on this. So you shift that. And instead of it being, a lot of the times, it's not even what we want, it's what we don't want. We say, oh, I don't want that. I don't want that. What do you want? Right? And refine that, hone that, set that dial to say, these are the experiences I'm interested in having. And so when it comes to spirits, magic, energy, that, and gods, that's what you start to experience. Gods is a very interesting part because when we deal with gods, a lot of our experience is informed by our bias. And so I had always had a very interesting relationship with the divine, and I was very intrigued by it and its mysteries, and I wanted to learn more. I was raised Christian, and so I had a very specific state of mind when it came to that. And it took a lot, even though I was very interested, to deprogram myself from a lot of the things that I learned, which, if you research the history of Christianity and, of course, Catholicism, and what happened to the beliefs of people that they came to rule under or that became acclimated, um, you know, that's informed by, uh, like, okay, I'm trying to be vague about it, but I'm just going to say it outright. Anything that wasn't Christian was a demon. Anything that wasn't Christian had to do with the devil. Anything that, didn't talk about Christ was profane and um, heathenry and paganism, and that was the devil. And it's like, you look at that mindset, you compare it to what's going on nowadays, and it's like just this idea that there can't be all of these different beautiful colors in the world, and the beautiful colors of the world are equally as valid as each other. It's just black and white, and everything that's black is bad. And it's like, I'm sorry, if you're an artist, you belong in the color tribe, all right? Because art, even in art, like, you can't just have stark black and stark white when it comes to something that really is an experience to behold. Even an artwork that is monochromatic is going to have shades in between its lightest and its darkest. And that's actually an art theory about like the high tone, the low tone, the middle tone, all that stuff. It's really interesting. But even in art, you have this variance. So it's like in life and spirituality, it's very much the same way. And so there's a lot of different nuance to all of these different areas. And so it's not, for me, right, to cast judgment on something that I don't understand or didn't at that time. And still, there's a lot of mystery and enigma to it. So it's like, I can't turn around and judge it when I don't know. So when I came out of, that sort of Christianity corner, there was a lot of things that I needed to learn and a lot of things that I needed to be deprogrammed from in order to understand the way reality actually was or actually is, which is a lot of color, and there's a lot of darks and there's a lot of lights and there's a lot of beautiful things, right? And there's a lot of love, and God is still a part of that process, but it's different. It's different. And I think that there's a lot of people that separate themselves from Christianity because it feels too restrictive. It feels too limiting. It's like it's unjudgmental. So, getting back to the point that I was trying to make about God stuff being interesting and having to do with the dial is a God is a larger being, a larger consciousness, and has a higher dimensionality than we do. So there's just like an immense amount of complexity. And your dial is going to kind of set what experience you're going to have of that sort of a being. So that's not 100% because it's like the dial works really well when it comes to passive feeds, but gods are more active. It isn't a passive feed. It's a feed with a personality, with a perspective, with opinions, and that sort of thing. So as an active feed, they're going to have a sense of choice. So your dial might be set to certain experiences, but they may turn around and do something that very much is not in tune with your dial. But nonetheless, it is something that says how your initial experience is going to go and how you kind of interpret what happens. Because as a higher being, they are going to be a lot larger than you. So you're only going to get snapshots of what might be happening. And how you interpret that is based upon your dial and your mind. And if you haven't been healing and you haven't been working on yourself, then there's a lot of fractures for that energy to bounce off of and to become distorted by your subconscious. But that's all really, really complicated. So when I talk about all the different colors, I mean all of these different gods and goddesses that are responsible, according to their myths, for all these different things, and that it's just a beautiful thing to interact with. Because the way that I sort of thought of it was that gods and goddesses were already present to some degree, and part of our history with them is trying to find a way to understand them. And so I hear a lot about this thing where it's like there's one ruling power and that all the gods and goddesses are different masks for that power. And that's not untrue, but that's not exactly my experience. It's kind of like there's a ladder of divinity, and at the top and they all connect at the top. There's a bunch of ladders all leading upwards towards divinity, and they all connect at the top. And as they're going up, they kind of merge, so you have like these many connections that then become like these smaller, right, combined connections that then end up meeting and becoming the one at some point in time, which is of course the source. And how you interact with that ladder, if you're interested in God work or immortal work, is dependent on your dial. And so there's a lot of stuff that's dependent on your dial. And as you get more advanced, your abilities and your feed becomes increasingly more and more sensitive to your dial. So getting that down is super important. And let me see. Oh, I think that's it. So I hope you guys found that interesting and helpful. Thanks.